is letting entrepreneurs build in weeks what used to take years. And that's making us question, is everything moving too fast when the stakes are high? I'm Arrash Nekonam, and this is The Risk Factor. I'm joined today by two fantastic guests, Jaye Deighton, who's the Global Head of ICT Innovation at Peterson Control Union, and Steve Shearman, who is a serial entrepreneur and founder at Digital Technology Partner. Jaye, if you'd like, give us, the audience, a bit of an introduction to your background.
Yeah, so I guess full transparency, I don't have a degree in computing, anything. I couldn't write a piece of code if you asked me. And somehow I have found myself in the wonderful world of innovation, AI, technology. I really started out in business, so I've always come at this from a business perspective. My entry into IT was literally my friend at the time saying, "We've gotten rid of our receptionist. You want to come do a bit of summer placement cover?" And I was there for 4 years, and then kind of skipping forward a little bit, I ended up setting up or supporting the setup of a digital transformation consultancy with my good friend and energy logistics CEO, Sarah Moore. We did that for a number of years and then sold that business into Peterson, where we both are now. And just through, I guess, progression, putting myself out there, trying new things, ended up in this role where I'm kind of leading on the strategy for technology and innovation across the group, which, I'm not going to lie, I love my job.
Fantastic, really interesting, and quite a varied background and lots of progression there as well, but also very challenging. Steve, you've had a bit of an interesting background yourself. Would you like to share with the audience?
Yeah, I've got an eclectic career, I think we said. Started off early 20s as an entrepreneur, very much lifestyle businesses, into oil and gas. Left oil and gas as a region manager, working for tier 1 service companies. And fortunately, I was given the opportunity by my better half to go and do a full-time MBA. So during the MBA, met my business partner for one of the businesses I'm involved in still to this day, and we developed a piece of software for capital projects, and that piece of technology builds the financial models for capital projects. And I guess during that journey, I've really discovered how painful software development can be, and how expensive it can be, and how long it takes. And then set up digital technology partner really to help bring AI kind of into the boardroom and into the corporate world and help people find their way. And it's been an interesting journey for sure.
And for full transparency, I'm not a purely observer in this space. I am the CTO at COMET, and we are actually building AI into our products and solutions, really around managing safety, investigations, root cause analysis, helping us spot patterns and insights from decades of incident data. So it's a really interesting space that I'm working in as well, but equally one that we want to explore further in this conversation. Steve, firstly to yourself, I mean, you've had many business ideas brewing for years. We've spoken over them on one-to-one basis many a time. What did AI unlock for you personally?
I think the biggest gap is going from idea to proof of concept. It's always a challenge to try to articulate the idea that you have and the value that it will bring. And traditionally, you'd have to go to a software development firm and ask them to build you a proof of concept. Now, the next step after that is a minimal viable product, and then you'd launch your product in a beta and so on and so forth. But that initial piece, when you're trying to engage with a software development company saying, can you build my POC? I, as a customer, want to spend no money on that. And the software development firm know this is going to be a low ticket gig.
Yeah.
At the same time, they know that I'm not going to be able to articulate what it is that I want properly.
We have to imagine
because it's a half-baked idea in my head, which means it's going to be a very inefficient, low-paying opportunity for them. And given the fact, that statistically it's going to fail, 90-odd% chance it's going to fail, the chances of them actually getting the MVP job are virtually nil. So it's a really bad gig for the software development company. So, you'd see lots of these opportunities in business. Every problem is an opportunity to solve. And it was very, very difficult getting these things out of your head into something that you can communicate to people. And building POCs is one of the things that the AIs can do very, very well.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that we are hoping we can bring to entrepreneurship in the corporate space is, the people at the front line really know where the value is, where the problems are. So now we can help take those ideas out of their heads using the efficiency of AI. That's the biggest I hope I've answered that question.
Yeah, no,
the biggest jump is from idea to
rapid
prototype.
prototyping makes perfect sense, and is a kind of low risk area as well to operate in. But I guess, Jay, you're in a slightly different position. You're not starting from scratch necessarily. You're deploying AI into a well-established organization with a lot of legacy data. What's harder for you, building something new or transforming something that already exists?
So I promise I'm not going to sit on the fence with every question, but I think both are hard. So I think if you're trying to put something into an already established process, it is change. And as we know, humans don't like change. There's uncertainty. There can be a lot of challenge. And what we have found through our kind of AI journey so far working with you guys is that quite often we put something in front of the user, and if it's not 100% accurate on the first day, they're like, it doesn't work. We're not bought into it. But saying that, I would say that putting it into something brand new where you don't have decades of experience in a process, well-established, governance processes, workflows, etc., how do you know what you're validating against? How do you know that what the machine is putting out is of any relevance or any value? So I think they're both challenging. And I think we'll maybe get onto misconceptions, but I actually just think broadly the AI conversation, any kind of project, they're all hard. Like, I don't think they're easy. I mean, naively, when we started working with you guys on Lighthouse AI, we just thought, switch it on, ask it some questions. Yeah. And it was interesting because the first version that we had, it was answering questions in a way that we felt this is great. But when we dug under the surface and really started challenging it and putting it in front of the experts in the business, it was coming up with all sorts of stuff. It was bringing in information from all over the place. So I think both of them are difficult, but for completely different reasons.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I think it's that, for me, it's that you can kind of get 80% of the way quite quickly. Mm. That final 20% tends to be the trickiest part, the accuracy element, just that fine tuning can often take the longest time in terms of AI solutions. Yeah, for sure. On that point, actually, you've mentioned that the governance piece, which I think is quite interesting. How do you balance that entrepreneurial let's build energy with the enterprise reality of we can't break these things?
Yeah. I mean, again, that is hard as well. I think one of the things that makes it difficult is, AI has come to the consumer, the people not within the business very quickly through things like ChatGPT and Copilot and stuff like that. So everybody assumes that that's what it is.
That's their first introduction.
That's it. Yeah. And so, let's get on with that. And so the expectation around how easy it is to access these things, to build these things has, become, the barrier to entry is really, really low. Mm-hmm. So what we're having to balance, because Peterson Energy Logistics is part of Peterson Control Union, which is a large organization across sort of 80 different countries, it's a very entrepreneurial business. It is literally, go out there, find opportunities and turn it into business and value. So we're almost having to chase after the machine that's already running. So, daily I will, get alerted to projects that have spun up with development partners around AI. Now, that's not to say that there's not good process in place to sanction these projects, but we are writing the governance around how to manage this kind of after the fact. We put out an AI policy about 3 months ago, and it was actually welcomed because I think most people really just want to know what is our position on it, so that they can inform their customers, their stakeholders, etc.
The rules of the game.
What's the rules of the game? Yeah. And a lot of that was just, please tell us. But the other side of it that we're definitely focusing on, so it's not just about putting in policy, and we don't want to put in too many barriers because then things might happen without our knowledge. But the other thing that we're doing is we're trying to get a much bigger handle on our data, because that actually is the secret sauce to all of this. And if we can kind of put guardrails around that, we then stem the flow of any risk that comes from AI projects a little bit more.
100%. It is a grounding fact.
One of the things that I kind of reflect on when I'm speaking to the business community is who's steering that decision and what is their competence in AI. Because one of the things that we kind of laugh about at the moment is you're only an expert in AI for about 2 weeks, right? And then the whole world changes beneath your feet. So where's the competence at the corporate level to be, generating that guidance? Because unless you're swimming in this, all the time, it moves so fast. It's a bit like I've heard AI is dealt with by our IT department. Now, our IT department, AI is a bit like like HR can be treated. It should be treated as it can be treated as a strategic. You should have strategic HR. Forward planning, succession planning, the likes, not just hiring and firing. And so it should sit in a more of a strategic position, I think, as in a less operational, kind of more strategic. And I think AI is very much like that. It's kind of, there's a danger of being dropped into operational decision making, and not actually being put into strategic decision making. It will be talked about at a strategic level, and decisions will be made at a strategic level. But where's the competence and the experience? Where is the C-suite getting their input to make these decisions? And that's just,
and it helps manage expectations, right? The more informed they are, those expectations can manage, because the expectations can be here and the actual reality is here, and there's all those sort of games going on.
There's a pressure to adopt AI, right?
Yeah.
And, there's a pressure to adopt AI. And when I ask people, I'll start talking about AI, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, we're doing AI, and what does that look like? We've got Copilot." That's kind of
in reality, some of it can be defensive. So, for example, we made a decision the end of last year to get a ChatGPT enterprise agreement, and it was a defensive move because we knew people were using the free version. So that was a risk-based decision that incurred a cost on the organization, but the cost of the data going out of the business and going into these models was so high. We were like, no, we have to do this
somehow.
And what's interesting is initially when we put out the agreement, I think we had 150 requests for licenses. And since then, when I look at it now, there's maybe 600. And I did a survey to say, are you getting value, or do you want to hand back your license? And the responses I got were, please do not take this away from me. Just don't take it away. So I guess in answer to your question, I think sometimes, and it's not always true for every organization, but as long as there are people, like an Arrash, a CTO, advising the organization based on some of the risks and the opportunities, then that's kind of where the conversation comes from. It's almost like the rise of the technology innovation person into the boardroom to say, this is where we kind of prove our mettle a little bit here and help guide you on some of these decisions. But ultimately, sometimes it can just be defensive, and it's, a pretty clear-cut decision.
That's an interesting perspective, because I take your point about the CTO being representing in the boardroom, but also equally, as a CTO, we don't have all the answers either, because to your point, it's all relatively new. So we've got to really keep up the pace. And I think in our particular organization, we're dealing with, some significant incident investigations, root cause analysis, near misses on some, low hanging fruit stuff, but some significant instances. So when we're using this technology in our solutions, the consequences of failing at that are quite drastic, in terms of what can come out of that. And I think I wanted to just touch on that a little bit as well and say, well, am I maybe overthinking this? Is caution another kind of word for just falling behind? What's when we talk about build versus buy versus just sitting on the sidelines and waiting, right? Steve, from your perspective, what's the argument for building yourself versus buying an off-the-shelf solution?
It's a good question. Build versus buy versus wait. So wait's really interesting because we've been looking at building solutions and have started building solutions just ourselves, and we've taken a step back and went, oh, hang on, this is a product that will quickly become a feature. And a great example of that is the flash on your phone. It used to be a 99 pence app. Yeah, that was a product. Yeah, and thanks. And more emphatic, really. But that 99 pence app, which was a product, became a feature, right? Because Apple just took that in-house. And, that's a thing that's going to happen quite a lot. You've already seen some of these big AI companies hoovering up things, just introducing a feature, and you kind of go, oh, wow, that's one of the big ones was NAN once OpenAI came out with an agent builder. So building can be dangerous. Buying, yes, but you're spending an awful lot of money for something that could be outdated quite quickly. And waiting, seems to actually make a bit of sense. But of course, you can't wait because you'll get left behind by a competition.
Yes.
So you can't wait. So yeah, build or buy. I just don't think you can stand by the sidelines. You just either have to buy it or get on and build it. It kind of like sounds like I'm stating the obvious, but you can't wait, I guess would be my takeaway.
But you will be surprised how many organizations are a little bit apprehensive and are in that wait space. And I think, to your point, it might come to their detriment as things evolve at the pace that they are evolving.
I think getting on with it, but getting on with it in a controlled manner. So don't get on with it. This is a new technology. It's a paradigm shift. Electricity, mobile phone, internet. These are all paradigm shifts. They affected businesses vertically and horizontally. So it's get on with it. But I think there's huge caution around getting on with it from an enterprise down perspective. The great thing about this technology is you can proof of concept things really quickly. And again, using an Apple analogy, you're not going to remember this either, Jay, but there's an app for that. Do you remember that?
Oh, I do remember that.
Okay, so but prior to the app for that moment, when there's no app store, you bought software, £30 for a game, £100 for your Microsoft 365 before it was called 365, and you'd pay 20, 30, 50, 100, whatever for a corporate solution. Apple came along, created the App Store, and all of a sudden people can make small pieces of code, small, very inexpensive pieces of code that you could buy for 99 pence, and it would fix a really almost insignificant problem. But it was removing a small stone from your daily life shoe. And I think that's a really efficient way to get confidence and AI into the corporate world, instead of the traditional way, which is the board saying, or the C-suite saying, we're going to buy this big piece of enterprise software and shove it top down. It's actually going into your organization and saying, hey, look, we've got a way to take those problems away. And I know they may feel insignificant, but like the Sky Cycle team, they remove the 1%, improve the 1%, improve the 1%. And I think the cost of that is now dropped by orders of magnitude, that it's actually a real option now.
Right.
And people will get confidence because it's not business critical stuff necessarily that you're doing. And you can always keep human in the loop.
Yeah, no, really valid points, and I do test the app for that thing. It's we've got AI for that situations as well. And Jay, from your perspective, you've partnered with a few organizations, including ourselves, to build out some solutions. But when do you think organizations should build in house versus partner up versus the wait situation? How do you get the right blend of that?
Yeah, so I think one of the questions that we get asked a lot is, what's your AI strategy? I'm like, and I kind of caution our
question.
Ask AI.
Yeah, ask AI. I kind of caution against answering that question, because I think you should have some pillars. You should have some fundamental pillars around your data, your goals, but actually a lot of it comes from what does the business want to be when it grows up? And that actually forms your strategy for the business, never mind the AI strategy. And as you say, Steve, AI is evolving so quick. Your strategy is kind of dead within a couple of weeks. But I think the way that we kind of look at it is we have a large sort of vendor community where we're licensing in software. So we look to them to get added value from those bits of software. What are they doing in the space? Because we're not, for example, going to write, an AI model that is looking at data from Microsoft D365, for example. We're not experts in that. So we're going to push on our vendor community to continually be, kind of offering new services and value add there. Where we do look to build, though, and with the example with Lighthouse AI, is where there's a strategic advantage. If there's nothing out there, if we have a product that we're taking to market, and it's a significant differentiator for us, we've got good quality data so we can build a robust solution, we're going to look at that every day of the week. We're going to fill that gap.
Yeah.
And when we talk about building, we're not building, as you know, models from scratch. We're not doing that. We're fine-tuning things that are out there. So we're not, multi-millions worth of investment. We are using what's out there to try and get somewhere relatively quickly. And it is a case-by-case basis, and that is working with the business to understand from the operations, does this have value? And if it does, we'll explore it and do a proof of concept, which we're doing with you guys right now, to prove that value. So that's kind of how we look at it. Waiting. I mean, apologies, Sarah, if you're listening to this, but have you met our board? Like and it's great, right? Because they have ambition and they're really enthused by opportunities that come with AI. I mean, and I'm not just talking about the Energy Logistics Board, the whole Peterson Control Union leadership team are like, let's get after this. So even if I wanted to wait, it's just not an option. It's just not an option.
That's a great attitude to have, I think, at boardroom. I think it makes it harder if that isn't the attitude. If there is a bit of procrastination, I think that makes it slightly trickier. I suppose let's talk about what happens when things go wrong, because inevitably they will. When you're building rapidly with the ICT, for example, there are failure modes that we have to consider. What happens if something you built doesn't work as expected?
Well, you have to fix it.
That's the easy answer.
Yeah, can I just colour that in a little bit more from me? Sorry.
If we've got there's those expectations on, and I think Jay, you gave some examples around that in terms of where the stakeholders expect the solution to deliver, and when you deploy and get it out there, it doesn't work as expected. I'm not talking about the low-level bugs and things like that, but generally it just doesn't conceptually do what the user intended because of the probabilistic nature in which AI works.
We're taking our clients on a journey, and I think you Jay and yourself.
That's a journey.
It's a journey. It's a journey together, right? Yes. So, because these products are new and there's a lot of black box in their nature. I think it's important to, as it always is, to manage expectations with your customer and help educate the customer to let them understand what it is and what it is not.
Yes.
We've kind of got this human nature, a great tendency to measure against perfection. A great example, an example I like to use is, autonomous cars. When fully autonomous cars get out there, they're going to cause accidents, right? And that's terrible, right? But they're going to cause less accidents than human drivers are causing today.
I was just about to say, is it the car or is it the human drivers?
So should we be measuring the performance of autonomous vehicles against perfection, or should we be measuring the performance against the reality today? So compared to the reality today, autonomous cars are brilliant.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But against perfection, they're not quite hitting the mark. I think it's important to kind of have that type of conversation. A lot of people are trying to treat AI as a slave. Do that. And it's not. It's an assistant. Can I get some assistance with?
Yes.
And it's
augmentation.
Yeah, it is. It's augmenting humans. And it can give humans superpowers, right? I mean, it's amazing technology. But it's managing expectations, I think, because it's going to go wrong. It's going to break. Guaranteed something will go wrong. And it's how your client is wired up to expect that.
And I think that's the tricky nature of this. I think it is managing expectations. You're right, and I've been in that hot seat quite a few times, where the client expectation is a deterministic outcome, but we're dealing with probabilistic models here. So you cannot get to a deterministic outcome. So you have to appreciate some of the grey that's in there as well. With regards to, I guess, from the Lighthouse perspective, Jay, if Lighthouse AI was to make a recommendation and it did happen to be incorrect, what would be the process from your organization's perspective to kind of circumvent that, or put disclaimers around that from the user's perspective?
Yeah. So I'll answer that question and then I have like a follow-on thought, actually. So I mean, definitely disclaimers. I think at the bottom of ChatGPT, it says, it's not always accurate. I think Copilot says something different. I mean, not always accurate. Sometimes it just out and out lies. I mean, it just genuinely does. And so that, we need to be stronger on one of the things I think with a lot of the AI technologies, not just speaking about large language models, but there's a risk of human complacency. And I think that is one of the biggest risks to all of this, is around educating the humans to not get complacent when it comes to these technologies. And so, of course, if Lighthouse AI put out a recommendation that was not fitting and the human adopted that without putting their judgment into that response, I don't want to say it's not Lighthouse AI's fault, but there does have to be that reality check that just because it says something doesn't mean that that's what the human should do. The other kind of, because and this is not, I'm not creating an idea myself. I heard this at a conference I was at last year, an AI conference, around this concept of treating AI tooling, agents, whatever, as almost employees, identifying a job description for them, giving them a line manager, performance reviewing them, so that it's not a case of that. It's not a case of that something comes into the business and it works, or it's perceived to work by a certain number of people on that day because that's their interpretation of an answer. And it's almost like that echo chamber of like, it's, oh yeah, we're all right because it said it as well. It's that continual performance review of what it's actually doing. I mean, I was talking to our head of legal in the business the other day, this exact question. I was like, what do we do here? And he said, well, first of all, the legal response is the disclaimer. But my kind of follow-up was, but yeah, if we treat them like humans, we are continually assessing them. And his example was, well, what happens one day if Lighthouse AI suddenly starts becoming abusive to people? Who's responsible for that? Well, if you treat it like an employee, it's actually the manager. The line manager is responsible to make sure it's performing in a particular way. But it is the human's responsibility to make sure that it's interpreting the responses from the AI correctly and not just like, complacency taking over and just taking it as read.
Yeah, because that's a good point you made, because there is a danger that the AI diffuses accountability to a certain extent, because you've got, the vendor who provides the tool, the operator says, I followed the recommendation.
Yeah.
And then you have the organization saying, well, AI made a decision there. And suddenly nobody owns that outcome. So you can get into that kind of weird paradigm. Where I suppose we've drawn the line at COMET is that, we believe that AI surfaces those insights. It identifies those patterns. It suggests hypotheses. But where we kind of draw the line is it never makes conclusions. It never makes those decisions. It just informs the experts. It brings to light everything that they couldn't previously get across and leaves it to the expert to make the final decision. And I think that way we kind of keep ourselves as safe, because we could say, well, these are just suggestions. You're just raising signals and showing you patterns, but you're ultimately building it all together and making an action off the back of that, right? So you kind of keep yourself safe in that regard.
What's your view on just on that in terms of the increase of referencing that's now available, it's kind of come to pass?
Exactly. I mean, I think that's a good point. So the other safety net, I suppose, is the grounding in the data. So to your point, we were talking about use of tools like ChatGPT, Copilot, etc. That is using a wider knowledge base, which is in the wider world. But if we want to be very specific to our organization, our context, it's our data and referencing and citing anything that we surface to back to the data itself, and that's our holy grail.
It allows the user to quickly sense check, which starts to say, well, your responsibility is to sense check, and it's quite an efficient process because you quickly jump to the sources, run your finger over it, then go ahead and make your call.
And that's really important. I think everything being evidence backed makes it less discerning to use this kind of technology. Okay, so just moving on a little bit into building rapidly, learning as we go. We've kind of touched on certain aspects of this, but what would make AI more useful or more trustworthy for entrepreneurs like yourself, Steve, in the current day?
I think the cost of running these products. You can build a solution for your client, and you're buying, some of those components within your solution from another provider, and you're chewing up. Your client is then using the product, chewing up tokens, right? Which you're charging them for, having to then throughput, and that's also a change in landscape at the moment. And there's not a huge amount of clarity. When I pop a question into an AI, I can see my token counter rattling away there. How do I correlate that to pounds and pence in the bank? So I think it's difficult to build a solid ROI model if you don't know what your costs are as your users are doing different things and different volumes of consumption. Mm-hmm. So for me, I think a bit of insight into the cost of running these things would be.
Yeah, I think you've touched on a really important point. The economics around this is reasonably complex, actually, once you dig into it. And often the biggest winners are the ones at the other side of the supply chain, who are possibly winning off the back of maybe that non-understanding of the complexities of that economics model. But I guess from your perspective, what do you think the biggest barrier to getting real value out of AI for your organization is?
Biggest barrier. I think it does come back to that. What is the value proposition? So, for example, AI is cool, right? We all want to do something in it. We know that people are starting to value businesses on, do you have AI in your strategy? It's become a really big thing. But I think it comes back to it's like any kind of technology investment. It comes back to what is not only the value, but the perceived value. We talk about, the cost of the investment will result in X in terms of ROI, but that perceived value. So if someone believes that it will support, assist, them in their day-to-day work, I think that brings down a barrier as well. Sometimes people don't understand where they fit in the conversation. I think, one of the things that we always look at is how does the person feel that they're involved in the conversation when it comes to AI? Because that can be a huge barrier. They can instantly resist it because they don't see where they fit in after the fact as well. So I think that's one of the biggest barriers. I think there's also a piece around quality as well. So I worry about junk AI. We end up with a lot of junk AI, which kind of clouds the real value that is coming out of really good AI. And I know things like there's a new ISO standard that's come out around quality around some of these models. And I think that as well, if you can rubber stamp a solution, of course, you'll never get there 100%, but some kind of trust around the quality of something you're either buying or you're building, or you can get independently assessed. I think that, again, takes down the barrier a little bit more.
Yeah.
And not that I want to wrap everything up in regulation, but I do worry a bit, I don't know if this is a phrase, but a lot of AI washing, AI junk. There's a lot out there, and what is driving real value, and does that take away from the stuff that actually is?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
So I think, to touch on the governance piece, I think that's a particularly difficult aspect, because the pace at which AI is evolving, and governance by nature isn't as fast. So it's always trying to keep up. And I think that's the kind of gap that we do have, is that the governance is not always there ahead of the new models, the new solutions, the way in which it works. It's always trying to keep up. So I think we have to then rely on organizations' ethical use of the tools and having their own standards and procedures in place to mitigate all of that. Okay, cool. In terms of actually building skills to work with AI, you're not kind of waiting for someone else to build necessarily everything for you. You want to experiment a little bit, as you've touched on, Steve. But what do you think every business leader needs to have some aspect of, some just smidgen of technical skills or technical understanding? You touched on it before, to really harness and understand this space, or can they just purely rely on the delegation?
Yeah, so good question. I don't necessarily think that they need to have a deep technical knowledge. I think they need to have curiosity. Need curiosity at a leadership level, actually curiosity throughout the business, but certainly at leadership level, and that in itself will drive you into experience and an understanding and finding out about what's out there in the market at the moment. I think in an organization, understanding workflows is the key to unlocking AI. It's we're just very busy doing what we do as individuals, and we kind of know that we pass the parcel to the next person and they do their bit of transformation to it, and eventually we generate value. Breaking down what these workflows are, and because we're a knowledge-based economy, that means it's done on computers. It's one piece of it's one piece of information being transformed into another piece of information, generating the value. So if you've got leadership that understand that principle, then they're more likely to say, well, hey, let's map out this workflow, and then within that, where can we plug AI into it? And when you digitize or automate or put AI in one element of the workflow, including now if you do it to another element of the workflow, then can we connect those two up? And now we're starting to kind of leverage the efficiency. So I think curiosity and understanding workflows are my kind of two go-tos for leadership.
Which is great that you're saying that, because I think, Jay, you touched on the fact that in the boardroom you have that curiosity and drive for that. And I think that's the characteristics that the organization needs to have, I think, to really make a success out of the adoption of this type of technology. But you can't expect every leader to have to become a developer, right? They have to have a curiosity, as you said. But how do you build that AI literacy across the organization as a broad stroke?
Yeah, and I guess we're still trying to figure that out. I mean, we have, as part of the group, we have Peterson Academy who focus on that kind of learning, knowledge transfer, and we're putting out micro learnings around. It's more around we're trying not to scare people, but we're trying to say, just here's some of the areas that might cause some concern, and maybe try and avoid them in the same way that we would do with, like, cybersecurity. These are the things that you need to look out for. But a lot of the literacy, we're kind of at the level where we're trying more to encourage people to talk to the relevant technical people across the organization so that they can interpret the need and help them understand, rather than bombarding with lots and lots of information. Because in an organization, they're hit with HR updates, communication updates, finance updates every single day. And we don't want the AI conversation to get lost in it. We do have some mechanisms. So we established the end of last year, the AI expert team, which is made up of 12 individuals from across the organization. And they are both technical and non-technical.
Okay.
Because a lot of it is them bringing forward the conversation from the rest of the business to say, we've identified something here that we could maybe do something with. Once those kind of ideas are established, they then spin out into, other teams within the organization. Well, they'll maybe do proof of concepts and things like that. So we're trying to do it in a way where we're informing people that there is support within the organization that can help you when you have ideas. Here are some of the things that you need to watch out for, because we're not in every conversation they're having with every vendor, but also encouraging, please come forward and speak to us, and we'll guide you through that with a little bit of traditional training and literacy throughout that. But I was talking to our communications manager yesterday, and generally organizational communications are challenging. What channels do you use to get the most impact? The one we found is if you offer to win an Xbox for filling out for a survey, you would not believe the response that we get. So that might be a genuine tactic.
Definitely signed up to that myself.
Yeah. So really encouraging to hear, companies like, Peterson's are putting together what kind of almost sounds like a bit of a skunk works. It's the way to, as I say, this technology is a paradigm shift. So it's kind of like, how do you explain to your workforce pre-internet? Like, there's this thing called the internet, and they've got access to it at home, right? And they've got access to it at work. But what can it do? What are the dangers? How can they embrace it? How they can work with it? And it's that big. One of the things that we do is a bit of a kind of on-ramp for organizations is we'll spend a day with have a little workshop, but make it fun, right? So the first bit of the workshop is that we explain all of the crazy things and stuff and things that are out there in AI. Look at this and look and do that. And we've all seen it on social media and different.
Can you give us some examples of those? What's the crazy?
Well, yeah. 2 years ago, I kind of started with this one. You just take a picture of selfie of the room and say to the AI, "What do you see?" I'll just describe everybody in the room what they're wearing, and then you can say, well, what are the emotions of the people in the room? Well, the person in the red jumper looks a bit grumpy, And of course, it's great, right? So people have never seen that before, And then if you put up a humanoid robot, right, a bipedal robot, and then they go, oh, that's quite cool. And then you say, okay, well, that was one frame. That picture was one frame. And let's say we gave that robot 30 frames a second. It could walk into our room, know what's going on in the room, know what the emotions are in the room. So all of a sudden, you've just taken people right up to present day with what's happening. Oh my goodness, C-3PO's just around the corner. But by doing that with a bunch of, I was working with a very non-technical organization. The nature of the business was kind of non-technical and all of a vintage as well. And they lapped it up. To begin with, they were terrified. There's AI, it's nay for me. And then and by the end of the day, in the afternoon, we give them these tools, these kind of POC tools that they can make little front ends and little apps and stuff for any idea that they've got. We've got a garden project. And it's amazing the ideas that people come out with. But at the end of the day, they've realized that AI is something they can touch. It's not going to bite them, and they can now have a bit more of an informed position when they are looking at problems, and then how they can articulate that back into their organizational leadership. So just by having fun workshops, not an education session. Let's just take almost like a day away type field, as opposed to some corporate education.
Yeah.
But I think it's also creating that safe space for, it's a cliche that we say in the tech world, but fail forward, but it is creating that safe space where people can learn through a little bit of failure and take those learnings into the next phase as well. So trying to create that space for people to try things, I think it's something that we try and embrace as much as possible. But I think that definitely works as well.
Yeah, your workforce, it's not like business critical stuff.
Yeah,
right. It's just get them comfortable with
this technology is there and it can do, and what can it not do? And how well can it do it, or how poorly can it do it? So it's great to show it falling over, right?
Yeah.
Great giving it a demonstration. It looks great 1 minute, and then it looks terrible the next. That's great. Now you've given people
a little bit scared of this thing.
You've got people exactly, and letting people know. And again, we joke about it quite often. That phrase, an expert in AI for 2 weeks. It really allows people to drop their shoulders, right? Because there's no expectation of really anybody to know what this stuff is. And when you put expectations on people, it's when people start to clam up or start, frankly, making things up, right? Then giving your organization, poor quality information. So if we can all get comfortable with the fact this is a brand new thing. I heard somewhere the other day it took 70% of the companies in the US 30 years to adopt electricity.
Oh,
It's got an incredibly long adoption.
Angry Birds was 24 hours or something like that.
It was crazy, right? So, we want to try and adopt this technology a bit quicker than that. So how can we help people understand it and kind of get familiar with it?
You mentioning there about failure, I came across a video the other day on Instagram of a guy, a musician. He's been in the Chris Williamson tours for Modern Wisdom, but I think he's one of his friends anyway. And he was asking it to spell raspberry. And how many R's are in raspberry. And it was infuriating watching this thing, but also listening to it go, yeah, you're quite right. You're absolutely right. It is 3 R's. And then asking to spell it. And it says, it only gives 2. And then once again, so how many R's are in raspberry? There are 2. Yeah. It is just, it's almost comedy. It's comedy.
That very articulate and very confident. Right. Yeah. They're very articulate and very confident. Now, my 10-year-old, when she was 8, I think it was at school, I can't remember, they said, she's very articulate and very confident. And I said, you can get a long way in life being very articulate and very confident. Right? And this is clearly what AIs are, aren't they? Yeah. And also the sycophantic, right? Because they tell you you're great.
Yeah.
Well, I love it. What else do I need?
That sycophantic nature of it is actually one of the things I think Anthropic themselves have put in an actual department to deal with the sycophantic nature of AI, because it's such a big challenge that bias that it takes, that it treats the user as, if you keep saying something is true, over and over again, it will eventually agree with you and say that it's true, even though it's false. So I think we do have these challenges around the technology itself. But I guess a couple of quick fire questions for yourselves with no hedging, just whatever you feel is the right answer for you guys. First thing is, we said AI is democratizing business creation. Do you think it's a good thing or a dangerous thing?
Oh, I don't want to sit on the fence. It's good because, to use Steve's word, curiosity. I think it drives curiosity. From an IT innovation technology governance perspective, it is a bit of a nightmare. It is a little bit like the Power App mushrooming, where it was...
I do feel sorry for the data security guys.
Yeah. Literally these little things, cottage, industry softwares all over the place. It is a bit of a nightmare, but... was your question, is it good or bad?
Good or bad, yeah.
I'm going to go I'm going to say good. Why not? Let's go for it.
Definitely good.
You would say that.
Definitely good. It's a bit like the internet. If I wanted to learn about something prior to the internet, I'd have to go and get an encyclopedia, and I would hopefully be fortunate enough that my family had bought an encyclopedia and everybody had access to an encyclopedia. So, that kind of crushed the time between getting that knowledge, prior to the encyclopedia. Where did you go to get that knowledge? And that has just been compressed all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah. I literally sit every day or out walking the dog with a PhD level expert on any and every subject in my pocket. Like that, how can that
fraction of the cost?
Yeah, it's almost free. I laugh at my friends when I ask them, are they paying for some of these AI? I say, oh no, like 16 quid.
Yeah.
Oh. What?
But we know they're real, right? If they're not actually paying for it in money, they're paying for it in other ways.
Yeah. So I think a very good thing, because it's democratizing knowledge, accessibility, and people can access value or generate value.
Good. Yeah. We are agreed on that. Yeah. What do you think the biggest misconception?
We didn't get your answer, by the way.
Oh, my answer. Yes, I think to your point, I think it is making it more accessible. I think you as to your point, you have to go through years and years of scrolling through lots of material, and that was maybe reserved for that niche group or that specialist outfit, and somebody else can actually get involved with that very, very quickly or adopt that learnings. I think, what do you think is the biggest misconception in AI right now, from your perspective?
So I think the first one is that AI is just large language models. I think that that's what people naturally jump to when they think of AI. I think, and as I kind of said at the start, I think the other misconception is that people think it's easy, like to get to something that's credible. I think people think that it's easy. I really hope that maybe this is just an us problem, and actually it is really easy, but I don't think that it is. So I think managing the expectations around not just the monetary investment, but the time investment that you have to spend to train. I remember the first time that we put out the POC of Lighthouse AI, and I remember communicating to the board and saying, it's like a 6-year-old right now. Like genuinely, it's a 6-year-old, and we want to get it to teenage years, but right now it's like a 6-year-old. So, and it's taken time to get it there, and rightly so. And we'll continue to work with it, but I think that those are some of the misconceptions right now around it.
Do you think, Steve?
The people already doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I talk to people, oh yeah, like I say, yeah, we're doing AI.
Yeah.
Okay. So that, yes, we're doing it. I think that's a bit of a barrier. It sounds like a bit of a contradiction, because on one hand I'm saying, oh, it's easy, and now we're going to say, I think one of the challenges is that it's not that easy. So I'm agreeing with you. But I think it's easy to get the ball rolling in terms of trying to find value in your organization. I think that's really easy. I think that's the bit that people are missing, because they've got this, I've got all this data over here, and I'm going to put AI onto it, and it's going to do some magical stuff for my organization. They're kind of going from zero to hero in one step. And that isn't easy. I think what is easy is engaging your workforce, like showing them how accessible this technology is, and letting them know what it's really good at the moment. And if it doesn't work, that's okay, because we're pointing at things that are not business critical, because we're all on a journey of education. So I think that's the easy bit. But I agree, this bit up here, you know, this big enterprise application of it is not easy. The top-down thing, as I said before, I think the top-down thing, danger, you know, bottom up. Which is not kind of the natural order of things, particularly for a large organization who's used to having to kind of.
I think I see that as well. I think there is a misconception that it's magic. It's this intelligent being, you know. But actually, the reality is it's pattern matching at scale, you know, at enormous scale, and but it doesn't, you know, it doesn't have actually a fundamental understanding of anything. It's pattern matching at scale, but people see past that because of how compelling the response they get from AI is.
I love that this kind of, it's pattern matching. It's almost like it's just pattern matching. It's kind of a bit of a downplay of it, but at the same time, so this is definitely a conversation we could have over a few beers, because that's what we do. As humans, we pattern match.
But I think at scale, that's where we can't. And that's what I was in front of some real experts in manufacturing in Korea, showing them this technology, and they were saying, well, we're really good at doing quality control on all of our manufacturing. I was like, no, but 100,000 quality non-conformance records being analyzed in 1 second, you won't be able to do that for sure. So that's where we kind of had the agreement that yes, okay, at scale, it's a different story. What do you think will separate the winners and losers from AI adoption over the next 5 years?
So I think probably 3 things. I think people that look at it from, the conversation is about AI, but fundamentally it's about the foundation of AI, which is data. So I do think people that invest the time to look after, maintain, enhance their data, I think, you know, will help them win. I do think businesses that look at these tools as employees, so that they're kind of not controlled but managed and quality assured in that regard. You know, as I say, performance reviews, you know, job descriptions, line managers, they're just, because they kind of add to the human, as you said, Steve, that it's a bit like a superhero human, because they've got this extra superhero power. But I also think that the third piece is around making sure that employees understand their position in the conversation long term, and not to get like oil and gassy about it, but it's that conversation around, it's not oil and gas or renewables, it's and I think AI is AI and human. It's not one or the other. And of course, there will be some tasks that, through agentic AI, they can take on and run, but the human still needs to be in the conversation as well. So I think if you think about those three things and look at it from that perspective, I think businesses will make good decisions and they're likely to be winners.
Yeah, 100% agree with the data aspect in particular, with the human in the loop. I think, using a farming analogy, I think cultivating the land is what the data bit feels like you're investing in, kind of getting that right land for then growing the fruit and bearing everything from there. So I think that investment up front, I do agree with you, it goes a long way. If you try to shortcut things and try to get quick wins, you might be found out, down the line. What's your perspective on that, Steve?
Well, I think the data is a really interesting point. For 50% of the economy is built by SMEs, right? Not corporate. So, what data are SMEs collecting? Because they're not structured like converts. Right? So, I think there's a huge opportunity for value. If we can help SMEs capture the data. And one of the things that we've noticed when we're building solutions, and they become quite simple solutions, but we can create mechanisms to capture data as part of the development process really easily now. So we've got an example where we built it's a companion app, you could say, to a CRM. So nobody likes populating CRMs. So we've built a kind of frictionless companion app for CRM. So you can just use voice, text, or different mediums to interact, and it will then update the CRM. So one of the things is, from a business development person's perspective, is how often you touch your client in terms of when I send them an email, have I played golf with them, have I touched them on LinkedIn or whatever. And of course, if you turn up more than once, you've outperformed 50% of your competition. But how do you map that? So we kind of have this mapping mechanism. It captures how the individual, for the individual's benefit, not for the boss to beat them up for not calling people enough, but it maps. And then what we can see is that conversion rate and which of these touch types are actually most effective. So actually I can see I'm using often, but it's got a poor win rate. Or if I'm not using very often and it's got a high win rate.
That's
so
cool.
We can say, well, actually, look, emails or text messages or WhatsApp are really, really effective. Now, you never collect that data ordinarily. So now all of a sudden, that's a real key piece of data that helps me as an individual. Again, I'm not talking the rest of the organization. But then we can say, well, you've got that data and you've got that data, I've got my data. So now we can kind of collate that data and we say, well, as a team, look, it's resonating even more. Look, when we send messages on LinkedIn, or when we use Facebook, or if we use email, or if we take people golfing, right, it's actually really, really successful in closing deals. So building data for SMEs, I think, is really important. So.
But you're also with that, I guess, getting customer personas. So God forbid my phone rings. I don't want to speak to anyone. I'm like, email me, Teams me, WhatsApp me. That's absolutely fine. But to take a phone call, so I guess through that, you're able to put personas around your customers as well and be like, this person in particular responds really well to an email, for example, which is really cool information.
So I think collecting data, helping SMEs, build small solutions that helps digitize, really digitize small to medium enterprises will give us a huge bang for our buck as a nation.
Really interesting perspectives. We're getting to the actual root of the matter section of our podcast, where we want to kind of have a takeaway for the listeners today. So if there was one takeaway you'd want everyone to take from your perspective, Jay, what would that be from the discussion we've had today?
Oh, just one. Not that I have many.
One key takeaway.
One key takeaway. I feel like we're at this amazing point in time where we can make some really good decisions about how we actually deal with this because it's a paradigm shift, right? And how we make some really good decisions around it. I think if I were looking at it purely from a business perspective and less from a sort of human sort of ethics kind of perspective, I just can't get away from the fundamentals of data. I can't get away from, please, look at your data, treat that as the foundation of how AI is going to be successful for your organization. Don't assume that you can just plug in some model to your data and it's going to give all of these good answers. Like, it's almost, as you say, Arrash, cultivating the land before you start diving in too much. Just because I think that and we're all kind of pro trying and failing, but I think the risk around not looking at what feeds the machine is so high that people can invest a lot of money and really not get that much out of it. So that would be my one takeaway. And am I allowed 1.5?
I'll give you the half.
My half is just be kind to it. I say it every time, but just be kind. I know what's his name, Altman says, it costs more money, but kindness is, just be kind to it as well, and then hopefully that's what it learns.
And Steve, a key takeaway for you?
Key takeaway is if you apply it bottom up, don't be scared of getting it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So have fun with it and let your organization have fun with it. And I don't mean let them just run riot with it. I mean, create, occasions, events where they can actually go and have fun with it.
Remove that fear factor.
Remove the fear factor, and also give them an awareness of the risks that are associated with it as well, because we're not going to have to do this forever, right? In 5 years' time, we're not going to have to be educating your teams about AI because it will be ubiquitous and we'll all have been using it in all different aspects. So it's a kind of relatively short-term problem, which means you can kind of attack it head on. But I think from a bottom-up, let people have fun with it. Make sure that your leadership are honest, the fact that they're not educated in this space, and it's a conversation that's a live conversation, even with those so-called experts. But have fun, because it can be a lot of fun.
That's a refreshing way to look at it, and I would like to touch down with. I think, from my perspective, the thing that organizations need to kind of appreciate is that AI doesn't reduce the need for expertise. It raises the bar. You need people fundamentally understand the domain. Domain expertise, there's no substitution for that at all. You need processes that makes it safe to challenge the machine as well. You need to know what good looks like, I think, to be able to critique what you're getting on the other end. If you don't know what good looks like in a particular domain, you shouldn't be arguably using it in that domain. The question isn't really, should we or shouldn't we use AI? It's what kind of AI. It's how is it deployed? It's what are the safeguards, and for what purpose are we using this? So if you're listening and you're making decisions about AI, I think the one takeaway for me today is that context matters, right? The right approach for a startup is not necessarily the right approach for a full-blown corporate enterprise. The right approach from a logistics operational point of view isn't the same approach for safety critical investigations, for example, that we handle ourselves. Know the game you're playing and play according to the rules of that game.
Yeah.
I would like to thank both Steve and Jay for a very honest and engaging conversation today. It's been a lot of fun. Thanks for listening, everyone. I've been Arrash Nekonam, and this has been The Risk Factor.